Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for soul growth. Come journey with us through astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, I'm Sue Minahan, and this is Talk Cosmos, Insightful Conversations. Today is May 12th, Mother's Day, both in Canada and in the United States. So happy Mother's Day to all those people that nurture whatever children, plants, animals, the universe, each other. I suppose we're all our own mother, and that's really the gift of it. And congratulations to a fine, good job. Also, last night was the Aurora Borealis, and of course, testimonies were all across the country and the world. And I know that for myself, I was up most of the night checking to see, even though I live in Hawaii, because there had been a person that had seen it. And I was told, thankfully, having read it, that if you took a picture, that it was more vivid. Well, it was a little cloudy, and I think I did see in the north a little pink and a little green, whereas the other directions were black. So I feel bathed in light, and I hope any of you that managed to see it too. But I know in Canada, perhaps where one of our guests is, another friend who's up there said, oh, it was raining or it was cloudy and couldn't see a thing. So it's unfortunate. But it was quite a spectacular thing to see other people's photographs. We are talking about Jupiter in Gemini. So I suppose it's no surprise that these lights are big. Jupiter's the biggest planet. It's a gas planet. Gemini travels, is an air planet. And our topic is big picture connections. It could be that we'll get a little detail, but we'll really try to get to the meaningfulness. We'll glide through some things. You can go back to the slides because it's all about our belief systems. And in that, messages will proliferate. And it is a matter of asking the tough questions to confirm what is true, because that's what Jupiter loves, is truth. But again, it can't be your own opinionated truth. It needs to be universal, more universal truth. That is the imagery and what we hope to achieve. So we have here if we can get the slides up, we have Tracy Quinlan. ConsultTheSky.com is where you can reach Tracy. Dr. Laura Tad, who's with me monthly, her website is Mythic Sky. And myself, Talk Cosmos. I have a website. The link is always on top of it. And it's talkcosmos.com or the YouTube channel. Laura is a counselor, writer, teacher, lectures, and a retreat co-facilitator. She has a monthly salon. It's a podcast, Mythic Sky Storytime. And she often teaches 6-week online personal mythology courses. This is taking mythology of your own life. It's a wonderfully educational but growth-oriented class. And she's been on the board members and holds a Ph.D. in human science. So thank you, Laura. I'm always privileged to share with you. Thank you. Tracy Quinlan is from Edmonton, Calgary. No, not Edmonton, Alberta, next to Calgary, but hours away still. It's in its own city in Canada. And she is a certified astrologer, a consultant, a local conference speaker, and national conference speaker, a lecturer and writer. And she writes the horoscopes for Llewellyn's astrological calendar. She has astrological certificates from Kepler College and the School of Traditional Astrology, which is known as STA, and has a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Psychology. And she is still active with the Edmonton Astrological Society on the board, having been a past president, and is a practitioner of Acutonics Sound Therapy. So do look that up also. And that's Consult the Sky. Myself, I founded Talk Cosmos. And as you can read, I have studied the dwarf planets, and I'm glad to be here. And you can read more about me. So, hi, Laura, and hi, Tracy.
Hello.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Yeah, last time we had you, I think it was December 3rd, about Chiron. And Chiron really hasn't left us. It's here in these charts. We're healing the whole time. It's like incremental steps, or maybe with the recent Jupiter Taurus, maybe leaping steps, you know. I think, Laura, you mentioned that signs, they feed onto the next one, and made me think that here, although we're talking about, which hasn't yet happened, it's happening on the 25th, and here we are still, what day is it? It's the 12th. Yeah, it's 2 weeks away almost. It's a long time. So we're still in the throes of Taurus Jupiter in Taurus, yet with that conjunction, our healing could be spurting in great ways. If you have thoughts about that, I don't know. Here, about the archetype, perhaps we can talk about that, though, of Jupiter. And in Greece, it was Zeus, king of the gods. It's a sky god. Threw thunderbolts. That was his weapon. But as you know, it lit the sky up. So it's wisdom, spiritual beliefs, growth. Laura, you want to add? And Tracy?
Jupiter's the father of the gods, or right in the Greek pantheon, Zeus. And so Jupiter, or wherever we have Jupiter, whatever sign Jupiter's currently transversing through, right? There's this bigness to it. It can, they talk about sometimes, like, there's no such thing as a bad Jupiter transit, except too much, but doing too much, too big, right? Overindulging is the big shadow of Jupiter, right? Because Jupiter is often thought of as luck, but it can be too much of a good thing isn't always a good thing, right? And so that's the double-edged sword with Jupiter, is it can bring in luck. It's about expansion and opportunity, but it's right, that idea that each sign is in sort of response to the previous, or the contrast, right, of Saturn being the father of Jupiter, right? So Saturn constricts, Jupiter expands, right? Yes. He's action to the controlling energy of his father. And so his shape, moving that energy of expansion, and then we color that, right, with whatever sign it's ingressing into. So in 2 weeks after the last year, which is, it's roughly in a sign for a year, this shift of the physical world being more of what we're giving attention to, into that Gemini idea, thinking, languaging what we want to expand.
And Tracy, did you want to throw in good ideas?
20 thoughts at the same time. The other one, to what Laura said about the themes of Jupiter, the other one, when we think about too much, is optimism. Can be another danger of a Jupiter transit, as we get a bit overly optimistic about things we have going on, and less pragmatic. And that can, I think, really be a danger with this transit, just because we have Saturn going through also a mutable sign in Pisces. So there's a little bit less grounding happening, and a little bit less restriction, especially in the sign of Pisces. So maybe a little bit more danger of overestimating things with this transit.
Sure.
I'm glad to hear all of that as a reminder, just as a focus of a whole vessel that we're looking at, because Jupiter is a shapeshifter in mythology. He kept changing shapes, and it's a sort of like a sword, a careful edge to sit on, where you have visions and you're imagining big things. Pisces, no boundaries, yet you're right. It's like we need to stay tethered and grounded, but yet sharing maybe with the feeling of that big, because that's a lot of manifestations. What's the feeling and what can we do for it? So it's very well put with both of you. Then we have Gemini, which adds into this whole archetype, which is mutable And it's air. Of course, air is mutable. We all share it. It's connections and communication. Whenever I was researching, which I know I am a Gemini, and both Laura and I have strong Gemini as far as our Mercury goes, but it was communication. And I'd read it again, and communication. And I'm thinking in Jupiter, we're learning how to really hone. It's not just that. Sedna's going into, which is next week. We'll talk about with a panel about the furthest dwarf planet in Gemini also. So we're getting hit from many different angles. But how do we communicate?
How do we communicate? What do we communicate? Right. So it's the mode in which we communicate, right? In terms of, is it oral or written, or right? Because all of that is Gemini's wheelhouse, all forms of communication. Right. And so it's this is happening simultaneously, right, with Pluto's Aquarian entry, even though it does go briefly back into Capricorn. But I do think AI will be a component of this.
In fact, there will be, because it is a 20-year cycle. The next 12 years, I was noticing, will be also in Gemini, and Pluto's very involved, which we will be bringing up with slides with some of your research, then tagging in with what I look to. So yes, we are really in a transformational communication state.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I was even playing with just the simple take the ideas of Jupiter, the ideas of Gemini, and it's like the thing I kept glomming onto at Jupiter was too much. And then you think of the Gemini stuff. So, too much information, too many choices, taking all of those things and making them maybe bigger than they're ready to be. That kind of energy that we could be looking at.
Sure. Yeah, I can think that can be a big challenge for Gemini, is a lot of talking, not so much listening.
Or listening to yourself. That's the other name of the game, is because with these two twins sitting over here that are running along, Castor and Pollux, one was mortal, one was immortal, but at the end of their mythology story, they had to stick together. Spirit they bridge spirit and matter. So I think the true Gemini goal is to perceive what is that spiritual part that's connected with the matter. And yet it is quick, and it can be like the shadow on the surface, which I think if a person can remember the old adage, which might be from before with Taurus, smell the roses, take time, then you begin to see the beauty and the depth and more. But I remember Obama said here in the United States that democracy is messy. There's a lot of voices. And here we have Mercury, the ruler. And so I love that picture that I found on Canva. And he's a messenger of the gods. He could go under the underground with Hades, where no one else could tread. And like our thoughts, people are clairvoyant too. We have many gifts that people either have naturally or they develop, where we astral project, all kinds of traveling. But here it's adaptability and boundaries. He's actually the god of boundaries. I remember very early, they'd take 3 stones at the very outer limits of the city or village or whatever they'd call it, town. And that would be, don't go any further than that.
Interesting. Yeah, since he was the only one that could really cross all of those boundaries, it's almost like the anti-boundary, proving maybe that boundary isn't so strong. So
even as a baby, this is the mythology that, of course, Laura and I would, and perhaps yourself too, but as a baby, right out of the crib, he went and stole, because he was retrograde, probably, this is the idea, went and stole Apollo's cattle. And so Apollo and he ended up swapping. but there's this great exchange. There's thievery, but gain you could put out of it. And the deceit, in a sense, what you see is not what you get right away, which we consider to be, because it's so rapid. Every 88 days, it spins around the earth. So it's always going backwards. And good thing.
And it may be that part of that, like the idea of what we think of as boundaries from a Saturnian perspective is very, like, they're malleable with Mercury. They're a movable boundary. It's not a fixed thing. There's a boundary at the moment, but maybe they're penetrable, or maybe there's ways around them through that sort of creative playfulness that is that mercurial energy. And that right in that trickster archetype, it's like, not everything is what you think it is. You think it's a boundary. Maybe you just need the magical word to cross the boundary.
And impermanence. I love that, because I'm reading again and again. Tracy, you want to clue in before we head on?
Oh yeah, I was just, the other thing too is when with Mercury being the trickster. Oh, I'm going to find my words eventually. And Jupiter, when we talk about truth, I'm really curious to see we're having so many issues around truth as it stands. So what does this do? What is this going to bring in terms of the possibility of maybe one of the gifts of Gemini is to be able to see both sides. And if they're lucky, they've got other things to help them out in the chart. There's the, ability to remain objective. And so maybe this is an opportunity for both sides to come to light. That's where I'm going to go optimistically anyways.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see in terms of the information that we're getting, Gemini, what that looks like when you add a strong dose of Jupiter to the mix.
I'm glad you brought it up, because I think that's where we're going to head after all this kind of diving into it, kind of like a research when you have to dissect something. Because when I think of Gemini, it's not just two sides. That could be Libra. It's like many sides, up, down, around, inside, out. It's like, oh my goodness. Here, the Sabian, not to go into it much, but this does emphasize, because we round it off to the next one. And these are metaphysical, energetic imagery that are symbolic. But a glass bottom boat where you can see underneath the wonders of the sea. And it seems to indicate this idea of uncovering a new dimension of life. There's different astrologers besides Edmund Jones and the great
Rudyard.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Yes. And so this is a collaboration, but it seemed to be also that choice to do this. So I thought that was quite inspiring.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I kind of like that idea too from the Gemini perspective, because often Gemini can just sort of look at things take themselves out of the situation to be able to look at it. And this is very much, that you're not experiencing what's underneath the boat. You're just observing.
Good.
Right?
Yes, exactly. Goes along with that air. Of course, air does go into water. Air, it's always got that dialogue. But again, it's air in water. It's not water. I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what I was looking at the Sabian symbol, I do think it speaks back to what we were just talking about, of that the duality or multiplicity of perspective. Right. So to be observing the sea, but not of the sea, is being able to hold that cognitive dissonance that Sue and I were talking about on the phone the other day, that I think is part of what we're going to be seeing a lot. And is, rather than like Saturn in Gemini could be very polarizing ideas, the Jupiter allows us to have different perspectives and maybe a greater openness to hearing an idea that's contrary to what we thought we believed, and willingness to see what's of value in something that is not our perspective. And is there a happy medium? Is there value in varying perspectives as opposed to splintering and everybody's in their own camp and nobody's talking to anybody else?
I was looking for a slide that emphasized what you were talking about, so I pardon for jumping, but a little mercurial here. But yes, you're both identifying. And so I'm glad to carry this theme because it really goes along with our whole theme about the big picture connections of being able to take what appear to be polarizing thoughts, but hold them together. And I think for me, it's a lot of the micro and the macro. Jupiter being the big and Gemini being the environmental, because one is short journeys and the other's long journeys, and throwing out this idea that, you know what, your big belief system doesn't take account into this idea. In other words, not all homeless people are there because of certain reasons, or not all prisoners are there because of they weren't all violent. Sometimes they did financial things. I'm not giving any moral idea, but it's just how to categorize, how to look at things. So I like that cognitive distance. Good thing. I didn't know where to throw this slide in. We're not going to go into it long, but it does show the span. There's going to be an earlier one. But in 1894, it happened to be, and these are in air, the three of them, Jupiter, Pluto, and Neptune, all conjunct. And as you can see here in this country, because we have Canada represented, and I apologize, I didn't pull up the facts enough, but it's a Reconstruction era, the Gilded Age, 90s, as you had reminded me, Laura. And it seems to be interested in breaking down barriers like Labor Day. That was, maybe Labor Day could be represented as an early way of looking for the people's rights and well, actually it's the opposite of, no, never mind. I'm not going to go there. But these are a few of the thoughts. I don't know if we want to go on. Shall we just lead on? Let people look at it. Because more recently, Laura, we have 50 years of the cycle, which is every 12 years, a complete orbit around the sun. And within a year, 13 to 14 months, it is within that one sign. Although in 1976 to 78, as Laura brought up here, the fact that it had two retrogrades because it entered right at 0 and then it exited, and it was over a long span of time. So we'll look into that in more depth to get meaningfulness.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so because most people that are listening, right, have lived through these 4 cycles, these last 48 years. A lot of, at least, from the 80s on, folks that are listening or watching have experienced these. So I think when we have Jupiter's a really interesting transit to pay attention to, because unlike something like Mars or Venus, it's like, well, Venus transits, you get that every year. Mars is every 2. It's not necessarily as consequential in your life because it can be, but where Saturn, it's like, well, Saturn's going to transit stuff maybe, 3 times in your lifetime. You live through this Jupiter one every little over a decade. So it's long enough that you can track actual patterns in your own life, but not so far apart that there's not enough time to start discovering patterns. And so I think it's a really interesting transit for folks, like, so where Gemini falls in your own chart and how over this next year, it's going to be an aspect to your own chart. And then there's the mundane piece of it, which I was starting to discover this pattern that when Jupiter has been in Gemini, it has been in aspect to Pluto and the lunar nodes pretty continually. And that happens for this cycle, right? We get it trined, the Pluto in Aquarius, and trine in next year with once the nodes ingress into Aries, Libra, right? They get that piece of, then it trines as well, right? To the north of Libra. So we get it again. And so there's a gravity to it in some ways that I didn't expect to see till I was seeing how it was an aspect to both Pluto and the nodes. And so in terms of longer impact, because of the planets that it's in, the signatures that it's engaging with.
I appreciate that viewpoint because, first of all, it does connote evolutionary astrology that goes. And the reason evolutionary has its value is because it's soul growth. So putting that into perspective here, how we communicate, sharing ideas, whether it's creative or whether it's debating, whether it's expanding the trueness of our values and our belief systems, everything that makes up into it, and connecting with larger groups, seeing how common we are, like the mutable Grand Cross that involves Pisces, that it is really hopeful to, as a transformational guide, that truly Hermes and Mercury and the twins have that role to help us move forward. Action might happen in some other signs, but yet the germs of it, the foundation, the composting, maybe that's the word I'm looking at. It's composting. Yeah. In 1977, which was 50 years ago, approximately, Pluto was not in Aquarius, but in Libra, because it had been for 200 years in Earth. And that was the last time that then it went into Libra, which now we're in air. That's part of the cycles. Oh my gosh, time for a break. Well, the point is that there were many things. And again, it was over a large span of time. And it is incredible to see that not only were like the Vietnam War drafters pardoned, but there were energy departments several times. Government became an issue. There were a few shutdowns. But amazingly, on a social business too, there were two ways that states were not required to spend their Medicaid funds on elective abortions. But Anita Bryant, who had been an entertainer, was pied and resulted in a political fallout. She was anti-gay activism and became an object of ridicule. And instead of her imagery being a model Christian spokeswoman, she became a self-righteous bigot. So it is amazing how attitudes of reality, when we begin to shift our reality and not see it just from one viewpoint, but many viewpoints, we can radically change what we consider to be valid. Well, I think we will jump to our break and we'll come back. And this is the chart from it, though. I'll just say that we don't need to really look at it, but people can look at it and it does show that we have the same trine with Saturn in there. So it's very, thank you. Okay, we are going to come back to our Big Picture Connections with Dr. Laura Tad and Tracy Quinlan and myself. Stay here. We'll be back.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We're currently in the period of Taurus. By leaving a cycle based upon initiation, the energy of Taurus integrates spirit into a solid form of matter that is tangible and physical. It's an earth sign, concerned with self-sufficiency and the values to maintain the strength of a life form throughout its survival.
This is Martha Norwalk. Every Sunday morning, beginning at 9 a.m., thanks in part to the Ananda Institute of Living Yoga, we cover the world of animals. This week, May 19th, it's Behavior Training and Healing Sunday with me, and talk with your animals or human loved ones on this side or the other, personal awareness, coaching, feng shui, and private readings with Natasha Venter. Hope you can join us and plan to call in with your questions for either one of us. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Talk Cosmos brings insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for the soul growth with hour-long programs every Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific on KKNW. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. And to find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com. So grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Talk radio with a purpose. Alternative Talk 1150.
We have returned on Mother's Day, so thank you very much. And I'm with Tracy Quinlan and Laura Tad. So here, I'm going to just go through these slides really fast, and then we'll talk about what each one of us are personally doing. So this was 1977, and then it was in 2000 was the last one. And there, as you brought up, Laura, Jupiter is opposite Pluto in Sag. So these, I broke down. I didn't put a chart up for this, but I did break down a little bit. And interestingly, Chiron is involved, which I thought is so important, this whole healing process. And then we have the last one, the current one, 12 years ago. So unless we've all lived through that, I would suspect, just about. And that was June 11th, 2012 to June 26th, 2013. And here, Gemini was conjunct the South Node exactly. And you can see it amazingly in this particular graphic. It's 4 degrees and 41 minutes. Ceres, the nurturing and the grief, she represents how we nurture ourselves. And I appreciate the fact that Venus is there to help us with our values. So it was a dynamic year. Unless we want to say something quickly, I'll move on. But did you want to say something about that year, 2012?
I was just thinking about it on a personal level, and then started considering, like, if people want to look at the Jupiter cycle, the 12-year Jupiter cycle, and think of it in terms of the phases. So in terms of, when it returns, then you're going to go through a new phase until it moves all the way around. And so for me, when it's in Gemini, it's full to disseminating. And when I go back in my own history, I've made some really vital choices at this point in time that haven't necessarily gone anywhere, because it's not time for something new. It's a time to clear things out. And so that's interesting to think about for yourself. Where is Jupiter in terms of itself? And so how can you work with it for yourself?
Very much so. I have it in Aquarius, so it trines it, and it has been quite productive. I went to school one time in 2012. I bought this property in Hawaii. Yeah, that's fascinating. Laura?
I was in the throes of writing a doctoral thesis. So
perfect.
Yeah, that says it. Well, thank you, Tracy. I love that. I love the phases, and it's really good to bring it home. It's not just that fact, but how is it in relationship? And that's so Gemini too, right? It's communicating. It's another way to look at life and put it in perspective. Well, here we are. Now we're at our halftime break, a little over, because we're fudging around with our boundaries. Tracy Quinlan, consultthesky.com, Dr. Laura Tad, mythicsky.com, and myself, Talk Cosmos. And here we have consultations, workshops, and classes. Tracy, do you want to speak of something in particular?
Yeah, well, I am actually right in the middle of relaunching my Jupiter Club, which is a combination of helping people work with the planets with mild remediation. This isn't full on magic. I'm not that person, but helping people develop personal relationships with the planets. And then I also have a monthly workshop where people can come in. I've met so many people who learn all the language of astrology, but don't know how to put it together. So we get together monthly and learn a new technique on how to delineate and work with the planets. So that's Jupiter Club. And I've started a podcast, so Sky Notes with Lillian Bennett. And so you can check that out. And I've just finished my teacher training for Acutonics. So I will start, I'll start teaching and doing workshops soon with the Acutonics vibrational therapy. So there's lots going on.
Absolutely. And it really is expressive of all the energies going on with the conjunctions. I love these ideas, such a service, both of these, all of them. Thank you. And Laura.
So I have a podcast I haven't added an episode to in far too long. But so I have Mythic Sky Storytime, where I talk about astrology and myth and just various different topics. So you can find that anywhere that you go to find a podcast. And I have a couple classes coming up. So in exactly a month, June 12th, I'll be teaching a workshop on astrology and family dynamics and looking at the patterns that show up in our families. And then there's some of us that are the black sheep and the outlier. And so some people don't fit the family pattern. And that's really valuable information too, because right, somebody who feels like no one in their family gets them, that's usually because they don't have these repeated themes that show up with other people. Like in my family, there's a lot of repetition. I have a Sag rising. My dad has a Sag rising. My stepmom had a Sag rising. One of my brothers has a Sag rising. My dad, one of my brothers, and I all have Mars almost at the exact same degree of Leo, right? So we've got a lot of repeated themes but other families, right? Maybe that doesn't show up, but it can be really helpful in understanding yourself and understanding your interpersonal relationship with family members, or working with clients and to see the themes, understanding where they fit in their family unit by looking at the themes that show up. So that'll be the 12th of June. And then on the 10th of July, I'll be doing a workshop on dream work and ways of working with your dreams. So you can get more information about those and sign up on my website.
And I just noticed that next month we're on June 10th. And so we will have more information that you can really look at. Even last minute, you can still join that mythology class or self-personal. And I love the fact the class is so valuable. But both of you are really addressing the fact of bringing astrology to the personal, not just so abstract with mundane. And that is just a gift. So thank you. For myself, I started on a new podcast. It's not my podcast. It's Liz Mouchette's. Elizabeth, she has Astrology Star Sisters Talk Over Tea, and it's growing quite a bit. And I'm on once a month. And I just spoke about Jupiter and Gemini, and she did a different take. It was so all of these many, many astrologers, because it's the biggest thing happening in town right now. And it's not to me a pun, but it's true. And so you might listen to that. And it's on my playlist, videos featuring Sue Minahan. And I have a blog that I've just started the last 2 months that goes out every weekly. So you can join that. And I'm also putting it on Substack.com. I'm trying to promote those and understand it. And it's really my take on, as though you're talking with me about a philosophy. It's informational, but for instance, like Taurus new moon, I went back to the age of Taurus, which is back in Mesopotamia, things like that. But it's so it's been fun. And here, as you can see, there's a little QR code that I think Laura helped me make. And Liz reminded me that the Cosmos flower, I hadn't been using it, but it's a gorgeous flower, very spiritual. So I'm going to look into that. Anyway, thank you for signing up for my newsletter, the show, and keeping in touch with us. Here we have the current chart. Now we have other things afterwards, but this is the chart, and generally it has the trine with Pluto and sextiled by Saturn and a cardinal grand cross, that's action oriented, and then another trine with the moon, with the asteroid Juno. So we're trying to get our emotional structures, you might say, connected with what our alliances are. There's these different fractions. We're working on many fronts. And that's as of May 25th. Do you want to bring attention to anything?
This is quite the ingress chart. When you look at that Mars moving to conjunct Chiron and Chiron perfectly square Ceres, that looks intense. It's the first word that comes to mind, especially around, Ceres to me on a grand scale is our food sources, and, Mars being quite feisty. I have it transiting my moon right now. Brace yourselves, ladies.
Well, it's a healing. They did conjunct. It conjunct back with when Jupiter on April 21st, they had simultaneously within just 9 hours of each other. So now it's separating a little bit, but it's so potent. So if it's on your moon, you're making you did great new separations. You're now an Acutonics practitioner. So it's empowering. I love it.
Well, what's really interesting when we think about the moving from Taurus into Gemini is that I just am in the process of taking all of my digital stuff and moving to a new platform. And so it's like this huge, giant preparation for Jupiter going into Gemini, which I hadn't even thought of until we, getting ready to talk about this. And I didn't do it on purpose, but it seems to be a very an excellent thing I did. Using the energy and getting prepared in advance instead of panicking in the middle of it all, right? And so being able to disseminate information a little bit better,
I understand that. I have a project that I'm on hold with because it's the podcasts. I want to make them into YouTubes. So I have everything on YouTube. So I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't linked it together, but it really is the big picture connections that we're doing. Yeah.
It's nice to see Venus in there with Jupiter for this ingress chart though.
Yep. Softening
it all up.
Yeah. I think that can help us with that idea of like, maybe we listen to each other. We listen to other ideas as opposed to the polarization that could happen. I mean, if we just look at what's going on politically, and ideals, and it's very, very polarized. And hopefully, with this Gemini energy, there can be multiplicity instead of polarization, or instead of black and white thinking.
I love
that ability to hold, that cognitive dissonance ability to hold conflicting ideas simultaneously. That is so important for everybody in psychological well-being and all of that.
One of the problems that we've had, problem it probably isn't the right word, but because where we have all of the outer planets, we have gone through these phases now for the last while where when the faster moving things move into where the outer planets are, we don't have any air. Mm-hmm. And so that lack of logic and that inability to process things on an intellectual level, I think has really fed where we are right now. And so even just having, a nice stretch of air where we're just not going to have time, where we're not going to have planets and air, I think just that in itself elementally is going to be quite helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Looking over the year of this 12-month cycle that we'll have, pretty soon on June 3rd, Pluto will trine in early at 1 degree 53. It happens to be right on my Jupiter. So that's exciting. And then we have 2 squares with Saturn, not 3, but only 2. One will be on the 20th of August at 17 degrees. And then on Christmas Eve on the 24th for those people that celebrate, but regardless, it's the 24th of December. It'll be at 14, right in the middle. It'll be retrograde at that time. Jupiter will be retrograde. And there is a retrograde season, which here in this country is interesting because on the 9th of January, just before the elections, which will be in
October.
Thank you. I'm spinning. Thank you. Going fast, too fast. Slow down. You go too fast. Yeah. Mm-hmm. January 9th. And when it retrogrades, it goes back 10 degrees. I went over cycle after cycle, and it's 10 degrees. It's amazing. No matter what, it might cross signs, but it's still 10 degrees. So then it won't go direct until February 26th. And that's the last of the outer planets. They'll all be direct for a while. Although I will say Mars goes retrograde. So here we have, I think, because we have quite a bit, I'm going to kind of roll along. This is the current cycle. So we have that trine to Pluto, and it's very similar because it's not that far away from the initiation in May 25th. But interestingly, on the next cycle, Pluto will be trining 3 times. So here we have in as well the square Saturn. And during the same time, there's 2 of them. And the first one will be on the 19th of August.
Well, I'm just seeing that that particular one is with Mars, the square. Yes. So it's not just this face off of expansion and constriction or this tension between father and son, archetypally, right? But then we get Mars in there. And so that can be, Mars can be temper, right? Like, yeah, I've had Mars, whenever Mars hits my moon, wow, my fuse is crazy short.
Well, it's separate so fast and it's instinctive. And here it's multiplicity. Can't even say the word. It wants to scatter everywhere. And it's like, how do you hone things in? It's going to be quite a job for Miss, if it is a Miss, or for Ms. Venus there in Virgo. How do I discern all this stuff,
Well, so then we're looking at a T-square. So the way out of that, you always look to the polarity point, right? So then we're looking at 17 to 20 degree Sag as the resolution.
But again, because it's spirit and matter, I think all of this will work. We'll see how it goes. It's a wait and see. The second one is going to be after the election here and just on the holidays. And there's a lot going on there too, without really looking at it. And again, Mars is going to be quite active, but here it's going to be is action. It's oppositions. It's T-squares, oppositions, and squares are all action. So we're going to be a lot of activity. So we shall wait and see on that. What I want to get to is our philosophy at the end. So if I seem to be kind of pushing it, jump in. I don't mind that. I wanted to go back 250 years ago as of the next one, because in 1787, there was a Gemini conjunction, and that happened to be Jupiter in Gemini. And it was a constitutional convention because it was during the revolution with England, and they noticed that the Confederate Articles of Confederation didn't have a strong enough central government. So they threw it out, and through the next course of the years, this is from 1775, 76, they established a constitution. Of course, the war ended in 81, and then it was actually a truce in 83. So this is some years later. Nothing happened immediate, but they did write a new document, and it was the first in the world, along with the Bill of Rights. So what I'm getting at is there's a bi-wheel with the next conjunction. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that there's hope. And maybe we can talk about more of that with some questions that I've got. Because if you can see here, Pluto was both within, even though they're 4 degrees apart from then to now, Jupiter was trine exactly. I'm duplicating. Why am I duplicating? I'm echoing on my end. Is my sound off?
Now
anyway,
we can hear you.
Yeah, but I'm not. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm echoing. There's 2 of me. Okay. The point is,
Gemini.
Yeah, exactly. So look at the blue, the grand trine there. That's really the big thing, is that Jupiter is 19 and it was 19. Chiron was 15. Well, no, forget that one. Whereas, okay, they're exactly the same. Oh, here we are on the outside one. Jupiter was 15, it was 15. And so, it's going to be powerful. Perhaps we just want to talk more philosophically at this point. We have 5 minutes without all the details. And finally, I have the slide about cognitive distance that you'd brought up about holding contrary thoughts instead of black and white. It's the collect and or both, and holding that tension for many possibilities to review them. And
it'll be interesting to see what comes forward. Go ahead.
Well, it is. And again, it was really what was that last one that I was here? It's asking the tough questions. I think that's part of having Pluto there. Pluto protects, it's concerned with being betrayed. It uncovers things, but it's for the interest of the collective, for the individual, for the humanity as a whole.
So I wonder to some extent if there's a Virgonian quality to this, right? Because the Pluto trine, right? It's not just the get as much data as you can Gemini. The Pluto wants there to be depth, and then it's an Aquarius, which is about humanity. And so then also but it's like, oh, but Virgo is also the humanitarian. So there's this Virgo energy, I think, that can come out of that trine, of it not being the surface level energy that can be Gemini.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Because some of the concepts that we might be working on is this age-old one that was paraphrased by Einstein and probably many other times. Are we supported by the universe? Is it friendly or not? I mean, is everything agin us, AGIN, or is it somehow lemonade made out of lemons? It's something that we deal with. And perhaps, and he said a few more that it's hard to choose them. But I love this. And imagination is that creativity that if we can kind of branch out from seeing things so literate that it has to be A to B, but mercurial, you could say. And Jupiter wants us to understand things.
Yeah.
Well, then I'll go to the next one. How about this? There's 2 ways. This is our last one. 2 ways of spreading light: to be the candle or the mirror that reflects it. So looking at, like, I think Tracy, you were mentioning about or both of you, about what is truth these days, and what is just these days. And between the 2 camps of thought, if we can start breaking it down into the micro, to just disengage it a little bit, from being so strict.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think people's inclination is to bring things to a smaller place. So,
well, for control, yes, perhaps, or just to understand it for processing. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're missing connection as well. So, I think that people just in general are wanting things closer up, and I feel like the Jupiter and Gemini will be helpful with that.
Good point. I know that I had a family member, it's Mother's Day, and she was wishing everybody, and we were chatting a little bit, and she says, we should do this once a week, kind of catch up with what people are doing. That's so Gemini, isn't it? Yeah. It's like learning how to connect.
Yeah.
so that we're with ourselves, with our world. And I love some of these words that you've brought up. It was malleable, penetrable, impermanence. I think that's the name of the game. Life keeps changing. If you go to Einstein, energy never stayed the same. And you're both doing it. You have the podcasts that are alive and well, and classes, and we're all expanding how to express. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you to everybody out in big picture land. Do subscribe and have a great Mother's Day, or mother yourself with nurturing. Yes, we love you.
Thank you for joining an insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests awaken consciousness by connecting soul growth patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next Sunday, 1 p.m. Pacific Time, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.